This video is sponsored by Opera GX. Opera GX is the browser specifically tailored for gamers like us. With features like their own Discord server and more, if you're like me and you've had some crappy laptops in the past, GX Control allows you to dictate exactly how much CPU and RAM your browser is going to be using. Chrome might be a nice browser, except when you want to run literally anything else. Since the last time Opera sponsored me, I've been using it more and more. Opera is amazing for making sure that I don't miss a stream from my favorite content creators who do highly in-depth educational content, teaching me about all kinds of different things that I didn't know before. League can be pretty stressful, and a lot of times you can forget about your phone, missing out on important push notifications. Thanks to the built-in notification system of Opera, I've not missed a single update from the most important intellectuals on Twitter and Instagram. You can customize your browser to make sure that you get exactly what types of updates you want from your Opera GX browser. GX Corner will keep you updated about all the new games that are going to be coming out, and it includes a variety of different customizations, from special themes to wallpapers and a forced dark mode. Opera is the only browser that cares about the practical and aesthetic portion for gamers. Download today with my link in the description. All random, all mid. ARAM is the oldest casual for fun mode that has been around in League of Legends. Many different game modes have come and gone over the years, 3 vs 3, Dominion, 1 vs 1, yet ARAM is the only real casual game mode that seems to stick around. Despite the fact that ARAM is designed as a for fun game mode, there is still a community of highly dedicated High Elo ARAM players. Players who obsess over their rankings in ARAM and practice to compete on a high level of play in this game mode. In this video, we will be talking to the best ARAM players in NA and EU West, along with the best ARAM team in history with a ridiculous 95% win rate, as well as the former head of ARAM design at Riot Games. This is League of Documentary.
I'm Riot Mort. Currently, I'm the design lead on TFT, but before that, I was the lead on the modes team for a while after working on the skins team. During that time, I got to help make alterations to our various modes. As for the genesis of ARAM, it was a little before my time, but I've talked to some of the designers who were there originally, and basically it came down to there was this really fun community mode that had been taking off. You normally played on Summoner's Rift, but a lot of people had fun with it, and so the modes team at the time was trying to offer new ways to play League of Legends, and so bringing that community mode to life was one of their earlier ideas. And of all the different modes, it was the one that ended up being the stickiest. So for a mode to stick around, basically what it needs to do is sort of accomplish the goals it was set out. One of the obvious goals is engagement. A lot of people playing it, not just playing it for a short time, but playing it over a long period of time, right? We've had modes where some people play, 200 games very quickly, but then burn out and move on to something else. ARAM was one of the modes that actually kept people around a long time. League of Legends players would often just play that for a little bit and go, cool, but I already have League, why do I need this? And they'd just go back to playing League. This was the big problem with Dominion, right? Dominion was fun for a while, but by the end, everyone was like, why am I not just playing League?
In the early days of ARAM, there was absolutely no balancing. ARAM was just for fun, and players were just meant to play it as a casual game mode. There was no real expectations from players to get any real ARAM changes whatsoever. Health Shrines only healed one person back then, and Snowball wasn't even in the game yet. So meta-wise, it was completely one-sided. Poke champions were so incredibly dominant that champions like Lux, Ziggs, and Jace had 70% win rates in ARAM. Because ARAM's success was so heavily dependent on champion select, it led to the first iteration of ARAM tryharding, which was ARAM only accounts. The all random in ARAM wasn't so random in the early days. The pool of champions that you could roll was based on two things. First, which 10 champions were available in the free champion rotation list that week, and which champions you personally owned. So if you were on a fresh account and purchased only broken poke champions for ARAM, along with any other champions that you were incredibly comfortable on, you could pretty much guarantee a good pick for your ARAM game every single game. Multiply this by 4 other teammates who are doing the exact same thing, and you are guaranteed no less than a completely cancerous composition. This was the dawn of High Elo ARAM. Poke, poke, poke. For a very long time afterwards, poke champions were really the only thing that were dominant in ARAMs. Then came a revolution. A few seasons after its release, Riot began doing events for ARAM, and the first event was called Legend of the Poro King. The idea was simple. Throw snowballs at the enemy team, and whichever team hit 10 snowballs first summoned a giant Poro to fight for them. The new summoner spell, Mark and Dash, completely turned the ARAM meta upside down. All of a sudden, champions that were considered garbage in ARAM, like tanks and bruisers, suddenly began to see their win rates spike 10 to 30%. Poke champions who had been the abusers for most of the history of ARAM suddenly became the abused. There is a reason that Riot never introduced Snowball onto Summoner's Rift. It's stupidly broken. Besides serving as a consistent engage tool for champions, here's just a short list of things you can do with the Snowball. If you have a blink back champion such as Zed, LeBlanc, or Lissandra, you can use Snowball to throw down a very basic combo for free harass and blink back to your original spot without getting punished. Snowball is designed for engage, but that doesn't mean you only have to engage with yourself. If you have a champion like Thresh, you can lantern someone with you while you're dashing with the Snowball, so you can pull 2 players on the same target at once. Snowball also has an invulnerability phase while you're dashing. This means that you can dodge wind-up abilities that are crucial for teamfights. Big abilities such as Camille, Garen, and Karthus ult can be rendered completely useless with a single well-timed dash. And remember, when you're dashing with Snowball, you will always end up right in front of the champion from the direction that you're coming from. Which means that if a champion doesn't have space to stand on, they don't actually get to appear in front of you or behind you. Snowball has tons of different variants and uses for it, and it has well become a crucial staple for ARAM. This summoner spell would later go on to be nerfed and changed so that the range was shorter and the cooldown was longer, but the summoner spell was a revolution for Riot. What was originally intended to just be a seasonal for fun event added a crucial component for ARAM balance that snowballed Riot's thinking into realizing balancing things on ARAM is actually a very positive thing, and that we shouldn't be afraid of doing so. Because just half a season later, ARAM would meet the most meta-shifting change that it had ever seen, and it was in the form of a single rune called Dark Harvest. Keystones were initially introduced at the end of Season 7. Nearly all of them were extremely broken on release, but none so more than Dark Harvest. Today, if you take Dark Harvest on ARAM, you'll get 2 stacks every time you damage an enemy champion while they're low. The damage scales with the number of stacks you have. But when Dark Harvest was released, not only would you get a full 6 stacks, you could also gain 4 stacks off of large minions. It also empowered your next attack against an enemy champion instead of just serving as an execute. Dark Harvest would go on to be nerfed in ARAM only an additional 3 times before players decided that it was actually balanced. This would become a very common theme throughout the history of ARAM's meta. Mechanics that worked very well in Summoner's Rift, but accidentally broke the game in ARAM. Take Demolish, for example. Demolish is a classic rune that deals a solid chunk of damage to a tower. It's very strong for early game champions and tanks who want some extra plating in the early game. Today, ARAMers still take Demolish on many of their tanks, but when you're in a game mode that has only 4 turrets instead of 11, those turrets are much more valuable. When Demolish first came out, what some 5 stacks would do was intentionally run a full tank composition, and all of them would take Demolish. By having 5 Demolishes, they would be able to instantly one-shot a turret with a single synchronized big swing auto attack. And they could do this shit over and over and kamikaze themselves until every single tower was gone. Demolish would also go on to be significantly nerfed in ARAM only, reducing its damage by almost a third. It was also made sure that only one person could proc their Demolish at the same time. Demolish is still a very well-loved rune on High Elo ARAM today. But it was strategies like this that really began the conversation of how much balancing a for-fun game mode would really need. By this point, we were at Season 8, and ARAM had been in the game for over 5 seasons now. At this point, no one expected ARAM to ever go away. So in Season 9, we saw the first iteration of real ARAM-only nerfs and buffs. Although there are still some champions that are clearly better than others, you probably won't ever see another champion with a plus 60% win rate on ARAM for very long. So what does it actually mean to be in High Elo ARAM? Contrary to popular belief, it doesn't mean that the best solo queue players come together to play ARAM.
Every mode in League of Legends, the game wherever, TFT included actually, every MMR is separate from every other MMR. So for example, you can be Challenger in Ranked, go queue up for your first game of Normals, you're a base normal crappy MMR. They do not affect each other in any way, shape, or form.
If ARAM MMR is not affected by solo queue, how do you actually get into High Elo ARAM? And what kind of players are in High Elo ARAM? Unsurprisingly, High Elo Challenger players won't have High Elo ARAM MMRs. If you want to be High Elo ARAM, you're going to have to play a lot of ARAM. And most high-ranking solo queue players, well, they mostly just play solo queue. So how does ARAM MMR actually work? There is no official ladder for the ARAM MMR. So what players do instead is they rely on third-party websites such as What Is My MMR. But ARAM rankings are completely different from solo queue. In solo queue, high-ranking players have to queue with other high-ranking players that are of at least close elo. In ARAM, you could queue with anyone you want. That's the point of a for-fun game mode. But winning games doesn't necessarily mean that you actually bring up your ranking. Let's suppose you play a game with your friend. One of your ARAM MMRs is significantly higher than the other. Even if you go on to win that game, your MMR will always go down. And even if you go on to lose that game, their MMR will always go up. There are only 2 ways to raise your MMR. Either play solo by yourself, or play with other extremely high-ranking ARAM players. Even though High Elo ARAMers do value their ranking on the ladder, most of them acknowledge that the ARAM ladder is kind of a meme and it's kind of pointless. This is GomJabar. He has the record of highest MMR for a single ARAM player in the history of North America, sitting at 3,674, which is 200 more than the current highest rated MMR players in NA and EU West.
When I'm talking about MMR as a meme, I'm talking about the tracker and the leaderboard rather than Riot's internal MMR. And they're kind of a meme because you can manipulate them. If everybody played solo and always queued up at the same time, it would be a pretty good estimate of player skill because it would much more closely match Riot's internal MMR. But neither of those things are true, right? People queue up with their friends and they queue up at different times. Some people might play at 3 a.m. Some people might play at 3 p.m. So as it stands, it's purely a reflection of who you play with and against. And like I said, you have a lot of control over that. If you queue up with 4 of the best ARAM players on your team against, 5 of what Riot thinks are the best ARAM players that are queuing solo, you can win 60 plus games in a row and still not even be rank 1.
So if the only thing that matters for your MMR in ARAM is who you're queuing with, then naturally what's going to happen is the top players on the ladder exclusively become players who only play in 5 stacks. This is Aram Academy, a website dedicated to in-depth ARAM analysis. According to their statistics, the best theoretical team comp is to have 180 carry, 2 supports, 1 frontline that can engage, and 1 mage. I talked to the guys who created Aram Academy, and here's what they told me about the 5 stacks.
Dodging as a 5 stack is like a very common one. If you get a bad composition, a lot of these teams will just have one of their players dodge and hop on a different account.
Oh yeah, it can take like 5-6 champ selects to get in game sometimes. And even though the Q pops are fast, someone's dodging because they don't like the comp every time.
Once you eventually get into a game on the main accounts with high MMR, you play against a very small set of champs. It's always like a very good composition you play against.
Wait, so then in theory, the top 100 are just 50 players then?
Yeah, the top
Yeah,
500.
that's about right.
Yeah, the top 100 are like a small group.
I'd go smaller. I'd say it might be like the same 30 players in the top 100.
So essentially, these 5 stacks will continue to dodge until they assemble all 5 pieces of Exodia to absolutely obliterate you in their ARAM game. And remember, if it's 2 teams of 5 stacks going up against each other, it's 10 players dodging back and forth. And they won't stop dodging until both teams have Exodia in their hand. Now, even though there are a lot of 5 stacks that do things like this, it is not to say that this is the only form of 5 stack teams in ARAMs. This is the Ram Ranch Cowboys. They are an EU West ARAM team considered to be the best team in the entire world. These guys aren't actually very high ranked on the ladder, but they mostly focus on ARAM tournaments. Over the last few years, Riot has hosted many ARAM tournaments with RP prizes. Ram Ranch Cowboys was able to maintain a 95% win rate over roughly 1,000 games. And the main reason they claim they were able to do this is because these guys, they didn't dodge, ever. While in regular ARAM games, you can abuse the dodge system to get a perfect composition in your hands, in tournaments, you can't do that. Your first roll is your last roll, so the players that are used to playing perfect team compositions are not actually good at playing regular ARAM.
I think the most important thing is to say that we don't abuse anything. Like, we abuse maybe some rune that's OP or something, but we don't have ARAM accounts, we don't cheat or something like that. We understand the game very well. We played a lot of the game, a lot of ARAM. A lot of the teams that sign up for these tournaments aren't as experienced, and they're just like a group of friends that play, so that makes it much easier for us to get such high win rates. But there's people that just don't know the game, or just, I mean, most of them just quit because they lost against us too many times, and then, yeah.
Over the course of 3 years, Ram Ranch Cowboys has been able to farm an estimated $35,000 of RP. Eventually, Riot basically stopped doing RP prize tournaments because they realized that effectively feeding the Ram Ranch Cowboys RP is not an effective way to grow the ARAM community. Finally, let's talk about the actual gameplay in High Elo ARAM. What do these players actually do in order to win so many of their games? Aside from just being good overall players and having fairly large champion pools, the way that these High Elo ARAMers approach the game is completely different. It starts in the champion select. As discussed before, the best composition is to have 180 carry, 2 supports, 1 mage, and 1 tank or bruiser. This is the best and most balanced theoretical composition you can have, but even if you can't get a perfect 5 out of 5 team composition, it's still nice to get a 3 or 4 out of 5. This is a general tier list of what most High Elo ARAMers value. Supports and enchanters are first, engage frontliners second, mages third, ADCs fourth, and assassins and early game junglers last. Most people on ARAM will just build full damage and try to have fun with it. But if you're competing seriously on ARAM, then you're probably not going to have that luxury. What many high-ranking players will do is they will take crappy picks and try to turn them into good picks. Lee Sin is perhaps the best example of this. As an early game jungler and partial assassin, he is probably one of the shittiest champions on ARAM. If a high-ranking player is stuck with Lee Sin, what he will sometimes do is he will take Lee Sin and turn him into a support, maxing W and purchasing support items like Moonstone, Locket, and Ardent Sensor. Although this Lee Sin is obviously not going to be as effective as a Lulu or a Janna at his job, in many situations he will still be more useful than a regular Lee Sin. It is better to have a garbage god tier champion than it is to have a good garbage tier champion. The first thing you do after champ select in every single ARAM is purchase starting items, and most people purchase the wrong items. Guardian items are exclusive to ARAM, and there's a very good reason for that. They are insanely broken. Guardian's Blade has the worst win rate out of these 4 items, yet this item is nearly 200% gold efficient. The worst one, it's only 200% efficient. There's almost no scenario in which High Elo ARAMers do not start with one of these items on their first purchase. The only real exception is when some players will play mages that are very mana dependent, and so they'll purchase Lost Chapter first instead of Guardian Orb because Lost Chapter provides more mana. Guardian Horn, on the other hand, is actually so broken that it could be potentially built on everyone in the game. Starting Guardian Horn with 3 rejuve beads on a tank will feel very similar to starting with a Warmogs in the early game. You should never ever purchase red health potions on ARAM. It's more gold efficient to just purchase a rejuvenation bead. The bead will provide you more HP over time and can be sold later on. Now let's get into the playstyle of high elo ARAMs. In ARAM, composition is everything, and there are 2 main possible team comps that you could end up with. The first is an early game composition mainly composed of bruisers and assassins. The second is a scaling composition that has mages and ADCs. Based on the tier list alone, it is generally preferable to get one of those scaling compositions. But these high elo teams are still able to win with crappier comps as well, and here's what they do. Most people do not think that ARAM has neutral objectives. Dragon, Baron are all gone from ARAM, but there is actually one small neutral objective that can snowball the game, and that is the health shrines. The first health relic spawns at 145, so that's the first objective that you and your team should be fighting for. Whereas most players will just start fights randomly in the first few minutes of an ARAM, these guys will only start fights right before a health relic spawns. By fighting as a relic is going on, it means you're able to contest and sometimes even push the enemy team off of their health relic. The first health relic can be very important in terms of the tempo of the ARAM that you're about to play. Getting control of the first health shrine will mean you're able to control the next 2 minutes of the game. At the time of its spawning, everyone should be around level 4 and everyone will soon be able to hit level 5. The next minute and a half is very important because if everyone is able to stay in lane and continuously push waves into the tower first, then you guys are going to be able to hit the crucial and biggest power spike of ARAM, which is the level 6 power spike. Having your entire team a level up and having all of their ultimates up while the enemy team doesn't allows you to essentially rush down the first tower. Towers are the only real measurement in which a team is ahead in ARAM. Aside from the Nexus itself, they're the only real objectives that you can take. High elo ARAMers value tower damage over everything else, including kills. If you can quickly take the first tower on the enemy team, you will be able to shut them out of one of their outer health relics. And if you're ahead enough, you can even contest their inner health relic, cutting off most of their sustain. When a team no longer has access to health relics, that removes most of their defense against poke champions. And so every bit of poke that the enemy team takes afterwards is just more and more devastating to them. As you poke an enemy team down under their tower, it forces them to engage on you and take an unfavorable fight. They will have no choice but to engage on you. They can't sit back and scale because they don't have health shrines, and they can't engage a good fight because they're usually going to be a level down. As long as you and your team are able to get damage on the enemy towers, you are making progress. It is perfectly okay to slowly chunk and chip out a tower with things like Demolish. If you need to die and reset to go back to base to either heal or buy items, the best thing to do is to always just sacrifice yourself to get a few more auto attacks in on the enemy tower. When you're playing this type of composition, you need to always push up the minion wave before you start a fight. Even if you win a team fight, if you're winning it on your side of the map, it will still take at least 20 minutes for your minions to be able to reach the enemy side of the map in order for you to be able to push something. When you're playing early game comps, you have to always make sure that your minion wave is pushed up. By being on a timer, you gotta take every single bit of damage that you can get off of their towers. Now, let's say you're on the other side of this matchup and you have a scaling composition against another high elo team. What should you be doing in order to stall them out? This side of the matchup is a lot more simple, but also a lot more boring. You do one thing. You focus on scaling, and you clear the minion waves. High elo ARAM games used to go up to 40 and 50 minutes because teams would simply sit under their tower, camp, clear minion waves, and not even try to interact with the enemy team. These players are far more willing to do boring things in order to win their games, so sitting under tower and killing nothing but minions for 20 minutes is not out of the question. This is when a very unique event in ARAM happens, and it's an event that you've probably never seen on this game mode before. This is an event that regularly happens in Summoner's Rift, but it's one that only the very high elo ARAMers have ever actually witnessed in their games. This is when high elo ARAM teams will freeze the minion wave. Yes, you can actually freeze the wave in ARAM, and yes, they will actually fucking do it. Freezing the wave in a regular game of League of Legends serves a very simple purpose. You're denying someone gold and EXP before they can come back into a lane, or you're so far ahead of them that you're able to essentially deny them any gold or EXP whatsoever. Freezing in ARAM serves a completely different purpose. When you're playing an early game composition, and you know that with each passing minute, the chance of victory is getting slimmer and slimmer, you need to go to some desperate measures in order to get the enemy team out from under their tower and actually fight you. So what can you do? The only real option you have is freezing. By freezing and denying the wave, it forces the enemy team to have to walk up on you, to have to come up to you. If those champions are not coming up for these minions, then they're losing the only real gold income they're getting on their team. Basically, freezing is only something that can ever happen in High Elo ARAM, because it takes both teams for freezing to actually do anything. One team has to be committed to being cowards and hiding under their tower, and the other team has to be committed to look for a fight. Even though something like this is completely impossible to do in a solo queue ARAM team, if you're playing in a tournament 5-stack for RP, then anything is on the table. Do you see this guy? This is a Poro. They are well loved in League of Legends, and rightfully so. In every game of ARAM, you will start off with a single Poro snack in your inventory. If you feed the Poro, it will become slightly bigger. If everyone feeds the same Poro, then it will continue to get bigger and bigger until it explodes into several smaller Poros. Now, that alone should be reason enough to feed Poros every single game. But for High Elo ARAMers, there's even a practical reason for feeding your Poro. If you have a Poro snack in your inventory, then the Poros on the map will follow you for it. Poros have their own separate unique visions and can see into bushes. Although their tether range isn't very long, they will follow you wherever you go. So if someone on the enemy team was paying very good attention towards a single Poro, then they could essentially figure out your position based on where the Poros are going on the map. By not feeding Poros, you are actually putting yourself at a tactical disadvantage. So please, if you've learned anything from this video, just remember one thing. Feed your fucking Poros. Thank you for watching. Please like, share, and comment on this video. It does really help with the video's reach. Big thank you to everyone at r/ARAM for providing me with such amazing information on their community. You can go check them out in the description. Special thanks to the Ram Ranch Cowboys, Jason Zhou, SpazM, Omega, Just a Slice of Life, supercoolissac, GomJabar, Samidare, BenLaPontin, and all of the members of the ARAM Academy team. These guys taught me so much about the ARAM community and shared so many of their amazing clips to put into this video. You can check out some of their streams in the description as well. And big special thanks to Riot Mort for talking to me about ARAM. Thank you guys again for watching. Hit the notification button if you want to see when new content is coming up. You can also check out my YouTube Communities tab to see what new updates and new content I'll be producing in the future. And that's it. Bye!